Picture this: a house that has stood in the same family for 50 years, and a woman inside it who no longer always remembers her own name. Now picture her son and daughter-in-law quietly walking strangers through that house on Tuesday afternoons while she naps in the next room. That is not the twist. That is only where this story starts. 9 days before a stranger's signature would have taken that house away for good, I sat at my grandmother's kitchen table and opened a sealed folder that 2 lawyers had been asked to hand me in person. Inside were papers she had signed more than a year earlier, back when she still remembered every date, every name, every promise she had ever made. She had known, long before the rest of us admitted it, that someone in this family would try to sell her home right out from under her, so she had done something about it, quietly, legally, and she had chosen me to carry it out. I need to tell you what led up to that folder, about the birthday party where 8 places were set at the table and only 1 person showed up. About the lockbox I found clipped to the gas meter behind her hydrangea bushes, and the purchase agreement hidden in a kitchen drawer with her name already penciled onto the signature line, like a rehearsal for a forgery. About 2 signatures I found lying side by side, one strong and certain, written over a year before, one shaking, barely legible, signed the very same week she had been hospitalized for confusion. By the time I understood what was really happening, there was already a closing date circled on the calendar. 9 days to stop a $680,000 sale that 4 people in my own family had already agreed to. 9 days to decide whether I was going to stay the quiet one, the one they called the paperwork girl, or whether I was finally going to use everything I knew. What happened at that closing table, in front of the buyer, the realtor, and a title officer who had seen far more than she let on, is the reason my family will never look the same again. Watching from where? Please comment. My name is Claire Whitfield, and I was 32 the year I found out exactly what a manila folder could do to a family. My grandmother turned 79 on a Saturday in October. She baked her own cake that morning, vanilla with buttercream roses, the same recipe she had been making since before I was born. She set the table for 8, using the good plates, cloth napkins, and dried hydrangeas cut from her own garden. Nobody came. My parents were skiing in Aspen. My brother sent a text at 4:15 that afternoon. "Happy birthday, Gran. Skiing is amazing." My father did not text at all. My mother posted a selfie in her ski goggles to her church group chat with the caption, "Blessed." I drove 3 hours from Hartford after my shift ended and found her sitting alone in the kitchen. The candles had melted down into the frosting. The ice cream had turned soft in its carton. She looked at me like she was not entirely sure I was real. I cut her a slice of cake. I sang to her. The next morning, while I was helping her tidy the house, 2 strangers knocked on her front door. They handed me a sealed folder, thick and heavy, signed across the flap in my grandmother's own handwriting. What happened after that ended my family as I knew it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people set quiet boundaries that change everything, and dignity always gets the last word. If stories about standing up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves hit close to home, leave a comment and subscribe. That evening is pressed into my memory like a thumbprint in wet clay. I had left Hartford at 5 o'clock, still in my work shoes, with a gas station bouquet sitting on the passenger seat. 3 hours on the interstate, then the back roads through Briarwood, where old oak trees arch over the pavement like the ceiling of a cathedral. I pulled into her gravel driveway at 8:12. The porch light was on. Every other window in the house was dark. Inside, the kitchen table told the whole story. 8 place settings, a centerpiece of dried hydrangeas she had arranged that same morning. The cake sat in the middle, vanilla buttercream roses, with 79 written out in pink gel icing. The candles had burned down to waxy stubs stuck in the frosting. A carton of Neapolitan ice cream had sweated through onto the tablecloth. She sat at the head of the table in her lavender cardigan, her hands wrapped around a glass of water. "Claire," she smiled, then frowned. "Is it Tuesday?" "It's Saturday, Gran. Your birthday." "Oh." She touched the edge of the cake. "I thought I was baking this for the church sale." I put the flowers in a mason jar and fixed her a plate. We ate the cake with our hands, because neither of us wanted to bother washing forks. I sang happy birthday to her twice, because halfway through the first time, she asked me to start over. At 10 o'clock, I carried her to bed. She weighed almost nothing. Her wrist felt no wider than a paper towel roll. As I pulled the quilt up to her chin, she grabbed my hand. Her eyes sharpened, focused, like a radio picking up a signal through static. "They think I don't notice," she whispered. I waited for more, but she had already fallen asleep. I should explain who I am in this family. The Whitfields of Briarwood are a particular kind of Connecticut comfortable. My father, Richard, managed regional accounts for an insurance brokerage until he could golf 3 days a week and call it consulting. My mother, Patricia, organized charity galas and sat on the library board. My brother, Trevor, ran a small development company, Trevor Whitfield Properties, and drove a German sedan that cost more than my yearly salary. Then there was me, the paralegal. I worked at a small elder law firm in Hartford, handling wills, trusts, and guardianship filings. I made $47,000 a year and studied for the bar exam at night. My family called me the paperwork one. At holiday dinners, Patricia would tilt her head and say, "Claire is still doing her little legal assistant thing," in the same tone she might use for someone selling friendship bracelets at a farmer's market. I never argued back. I read the fine print instead. But this house was mine in every way that mattered, and no way that counted on paper. I took my first steps on that kitchen linoleum. My grandmother taught me how to read a lease on the back porch when I was 19. Her reading glasses perched on her nose and a red pen clenched between her teeth. She co-signed my first apartment lease because my parents would not. That night, I slept in the guest room and lay awake tracing the same crack in the ceiling I had traced since I was 6 years old. Around midnight, I got up for a glass of water. On the hallway shelf, tucked behind a framed family photo, I found a business card. Carol Denning, Denning and Dean Realty. On the back, someone had written by hand, "Comp value $68,000. Quick close possible." I set the card back exactly where I found it. My hands were steady, but my stomach was not. Sunday morning, I scrubbed the kitchen while my grandmother dozed in her recliner. The leftover cake went into a container. The melted down candles went into the trash. I wiped buttercream off the good plates and stacked them back in the cabinet, where they would sit until whoever eventually cleared out this house. The thought landed wrong, so I pushed it away. At 10:15, someone knocked. 2 people stood on the porch. The woman looked about 60, with a silver bob, a wool coat, and a leather briefcase. Clearly a professional. The man beside her was younger, maybe 40, carrying a notary seal in a zippered pouch. "Claire Whitfield?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Helen Marsh. This is my colleague, Owen Fitch. Your grandmother retained our firm 14 months ago." She held out a thick manila folder, sealed with a wax paper flap, my grandmother's name printed across the tab in blue ink. "She asked us to deliver this to you personally when the time came." When the time came for what? Helen glanced through the screen door toward the recliner, and her expression softened just slightly. "Come to my office when you're ready. Here's my card." She pressed it into my hand. "Don't discuss this with your parents before we talk." They were already back in their car and pulling away before I could ask a second question. I stood on the porch holding the folder. It was heavier than it looked, maybe 40 pages thick. The seal had been signed across the flap in my grandmother's handwriting, looping and deliberate, the same way she signed birthday cards and Christmas checks. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Who is at the door? Don't sign anything, Claire." I turned the phone face down and carried the folder inside. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where the untouched birthday cake had sat the night before, and ran my finger along the sealed flap. My grandmother's signature crossed right over the seal. I recognized every curve of it, the capital E with its exaggerated tail, the double loop in the lowercase l. This was not a shaky mark. This had been written by a woman who knew exactly what she was putting her name on. I broke the seal. Inside was a stack of legal documents I recognized from my own work. A recorded deed, a trust instrument, a durable power of attorney, notarized witness pages, and a physician's letter on medical letterhead dated 14 months earlier. Clipped to the front was a handwritten note on my grandmother's personal stationery, cream paper, blue ink, that same deliberate script. "Claire, when they come for the house, open this. Everything you need is here. I love you. I'm sorry. It has to be you." I read the note 3 times. Each time the phrase, "when they come for the house," hit harder. Not if, when. She had known, 14 months earlier, before the forgetting got bad, before she started calling me by my mother's name, before the wandering and the stove left burning, and the day she got lost driving to the post office 2 blocks from her own front door. She had known someone would eventually come for the house, and she had prepared for it. I closed the folder and pressed my palm flat against the cover. Through the doorway, I could hear my grandmother snoring lightly in her recliner, a crossword puzzle sliding off her lap. She had hired a lawyer. She had signed documents. She had left me instructions. That note did not let me sleep. I lay in the guest room with the folder on the nightstand, watching the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Something in me said to stay. I found the first piece of proof while taking out the recycling. A realtor's combination lockbox was clamped to the gas meter behind the hydrangea bushes, tucked just out of sight from the front walk. I knew exactly what it was. I had seen the same boxes on every listing in Briarwood. Somebody had been showing this house. Back inside, I went through 3 weeks of unsorted mail piled on the hallway table, buried between a phone bill and a coupon flyer. I found an off-market listing sheet printed on Denning and Dean Realty letterhead, the same Carol Denning from the card behind the photo frame. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, original hardwood floors, a quarter-acre lot, listed at $68,000, $50,000 under the most recent comparable sale in the neighborhood. In the kitchen junk drawer, I found the worst of it. A purchase agreement, unsigned but fully filled in. Buyer, Stonewall Capital Group, LLC. A cash offer with a 30-day close. The seller's signature line sat blank, but underneath it someone had lightly penciled L. Whitfield in block letters, like a rehearsal. The listing agent was Carol Denning. The buyer's contact was a name I did not recognize, but the name listed as the seller's representative was my own brother, Trevor Whitfield. I sat down on the kitchen floor and spread the pages around me like pieces of a puzzle. The lockbox, the listing sheet, the purchase agreement, Carol's card, and a sticky note in Patricia's handwriting reading, "Closing target, November 15th. That was 3 weeks away. I picked the folder back up from the nightstand and this time turned to the first page of the trust instrument. I read every single word. I called my mother that evening at 6. "Oh, Claire." Patricia's voice carried that specific, bright, managing warmth she saved for parish volunteers and restaurant hostesses. "How's Gran doing? We had the most wonderful time in Aspen. The snow was just divine." There's a lockbox on her gas meter. Silence. 2 seconds. 3. "Sweetheart, that's being handled. Your father and Trevor have been working with a lovely agent to find a suitable transition plan for your grandmother. You know she can't manage this big house on her own anymore. There's a purchase agreement sitting in her kitchen drawer. Claire." The warmth dropped a register. "This is a family decision between your father, your brother, and me. We've been managing Gran's affairs for months. You don't need to worry about the details." "Does she even know the house is being sold?" "She knows what she needs to know." A pause. I could hear the clink of a wine glass. "Trevor's company is going through a difficult stretch. The house can fund a proper care facility for Gran and help your brother through a rough patch. It's the responsible thing to do." "It's her house, Mom." "Claire." The register dropped again, all the way down. Cold. Final. "Your grandmother has dementia. She leaves the stove on. She got lost driving to the post office. She is not the person who should be making decisions about a $680,000 asset." Then she said it. "She won't remember the house by Christmas." The line went quiet between us. "Then it's a good thing I do," I said, and I hung up. I picked up the manila folder and Helen Marsh's business card and held them side by side under the kitchen light. Tomorrow I would drive back to Hartford. Tonight, I had reading to do. Helen Marsh's office sat on the second floor of a converted brownstone on Asylum Avenue. The waiting room had faded oriental rugs, framed diplomas from Yale Law, and a small brass sign reading, "Marsh and Associates, Elder Law and Estate Planning." I had called at 7:30 that morning, and her receptionist put me through in under a minute, which, if you know anything about law offices, tells you they had already been expecting the call. Miss Whitfield. Helen's voice carried the same measured calm from the porch. I'm glad you reached out. Can you come in today? I made the 3-hour drive again. Helen met me in a small conference room with a pot of Earl Grey and a box of tissues placed exactly between us, without a word of explanation. Your grandmother came to me 14 months ago, she began. Early August of last year. She'd had an episode, gotten disoriented while driving, ended up 2 towns over, and couldn't remember how to get home. A neighbor drove her back. She called me the very next morning. She already knew you? She knew my firm. Her friend Evelyn had used us for a trust. Your grandmother came in alone. She was sharp, focused. Scared of what? Of exactly what's happening right now. Helen folded her hands. She told me, my son will do whatever Patricia tells him, and Patricia will sell the house the minute I can't stop her. She wanted to stop it before that happened. I set my tea down. She chose me, specifically. She said you were the only one who would fight for the house, because you were the only one who understood what it meant. Helen opened her own copy of the folder. Your grandmother prepared for this. Let me show you how. Helen walked me through it, piece by piece. 14 months earlier, in August, my grandmother had come into this office wearing pressed slacks and her pearl earrings, carrying a folder of her own, the deed to the house, tax records, her will from 1998, and a list of questions handwritten on a yellow legal pad in that same looping blue ink I had seen on her note. She was methodical, Helen said. She told me the forgetting started with names, then appointments, then the route to the post office. Her doctor had used the words early stage. She said she had maybe a year, maybe 2, before the window closed. The window for what? For making legally binding decisions while she still had capacity. Helen turned a page. She wanted 2 things. First, to protect the house. Second, to choose who would protect her once she couldn't protect herself. And she didn't choose my father. Helen looked at me over her reading glasses. No, she did not. She said it without inflection, but the weight of it settled in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. My father was her only child. She had put him through college, paid for his first suit, danced at his wedding. And when the time came to hand someone the keys to her life, she had driven straight past him and come to me because she knew. She knew Richard would defer to Patricia. She knew Patricia would calculate. She knew Trevor would need. Your grandmother executed the documents on August 9th of last year, Helen continued, with full capacity. Dr. Ann Talbot, her neurologist, provided a written evaluation that same day confirming she understood the nature and consequences of what she was signing. Helen tapped the physician's letter. This is your foundation. The legal structure was clean. I recognized every instrument from my own work. First, a revocable living trust. My grandmother had transferred the house, the deed, the title, everything into the Eleanor A. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, dated August 9th of last year. She served as trustee while she retained capacity. I was named successor trustee. If she became incapacitated, legal control of the house passed to me. Not my father, not Trevor, me. Second, a durable power of attorney. My grandmother had named me her agent for all financial and healthcare decisions. The durability clause meant it survived her incapacity. It did not expire when she got sick. It activated. Third, the physician's letter. Dr. Talbot had examined my grandmother on August 9th and documented that she demonstrated full testamentary capacity. She understood what a trust was. She understood what a power of attorney meant. She understood that she was placing her house beyond the reach of anyone except the granddaughter she trusted. So the house isn't hers anymore, I said. Technically correct. The house belongs to the trust. Your grandmother cannot sell it as an individual. And under this trust structure, no one holding a personal power of attorney over her has any authority over assets already transferred into the trust. Only the trustee can authorize a sale. And the trustee is me. Once your grandmother is determined to lack capacity, yes. She's left the stove on 3 times this month. She got lost 2 blocks from home. Helen nodded. The successor trustee provisions are very likely already active. She leaned forward. Miss Whitfield, there's something else you should know. If your family has had your grandmother sign anything recently, a new power of attorney, a listing agreement, while she lacked capacity, those documents may not be enforceable. She let that sit. They may have had her sign something newer. I drove back to Briarwood that evening. The house was quiet. The porch light was on, same as always. Through the front window, I could see my grandmother in her recliner, the television murmuring, her reading glasses folded on the armrest. I let myself in with the spare key she had given me when I was 16, the same key she had never given my parents. "Gran." She looked up. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Her eyes were completely clear. Not the soft confusion of most days. Not the pleasant fog. Clear, like creek water over gravel. "You went to see Helen," she said. I stopped in the doorway. "You remember Helen?" "I remember enough." She turned her reading glasses over in her hands. "I remember being scared and going to a lawyer and telling her what Patricia would do. Did I get it right?" I sat on the arm of the couch. "You got it exactly right, Gran." "Good." She put the glasses on, then took them off again, as though she had forgotten why she reached for them. "They've been bringing people through the house on Tuesdays when the nurse is here. I hear the doors open and close, strangers looking at my kitchen." "I know. Your father won't look at me when he visits. He talks to the walls." She pressed her lips together. "Trevor brought papers. I don't remember what I signed." I took her hand. "It doesn't matter what you signed. You already took care of it." She squeezed my fingers. Her grip was thin, but deliberate. "I'm not gone yet, Claire." The words hung in the air between us, fragile and fierce. By tomorrow she might not remember saying them, but I would. I would remember for both of us. Trevor showed up on Wednesday. He never knocked, he just walked in, keys jingling, smile already switched on, the way he entered every room like it should be grateful he had arrived. "Hey, Claire Bear." He kissed the top of my head. He smelled like cedar cologne and the leather interior of a $50,000 SUV. "Checking in on Gran? That's sweet. I'm staying for a while." "Oh yeah?" He opened the fridge, helped himself to a sparkling water, and leaned against the counter like he owned the place. "Taking some time off from the paralegal gig?" He said paralegal, the way you'd say hobby. "Trevor, I know about the listing." His can paused halfway to his mouth. 1 beat, 2. Then his smile adjusted, warmth sliding into negotiation. "Look, I know it seems fast, but here's the thing. The company's in a rough patch. I've got a balloon payment due in 8 weeks, $740,000. If I miss it, the bank takes everything. Every project, every contract, 3 years of work, gone." "So you're selling Gran's house?" "I'm helping the family manage an asset she can't manage herself." He set the can down. "Claire, the money solves everything. Gran gets a nice facility. Mom and Dad stop worrying. I keep my business. Everybody wins. Except Gran. Gran doesn't know what day it is. She knows people are walking through her house." His jaw tightened. He stepped closer. "Don't make this difficult. We're family. Family helps family." "Is that what you told her when you brought her the papers?" He stared at me. The smile came back, but harder now. Performative. "It's basically sold already, Claire. The closing's set." He left his empty can on the counter and walked out without rinsing it. That night, I searched the bottom of the hallway credenza, behind a stack of old magazines, and found what they had actually gotten her to sign. A power of attorney, dated September 3rd, barely 2 months earlier, naming Richard Whitfield as her agent for all financial and property decisions. Stapled to it was a listing authorization for the house, also dated September 3rd, naming Trevor as the seller's representative. I carried both documents to the kitchen table and set them beside the originals from Helen's folder. The difference in the signatures hit me before I had even finished unfolding the pages. My grandmother's trust documents from 14 months earlier had strong pen pressure, clean and confident loops, every letter connecting to the next with that distinctive tail on the capital E. I knew this handwriting. This was the woman who wrote grocery lists in cursive and signed my high school permission slips with a fountain pen. The September power of attorney was different. Trembling lines. The E barely rose above the baseline. The loops had collapsed. The pen had lifted between letters, leaving gaps where the ink should have flowed naturally. This was not the handwriting of a woman who understood what she was signing. This was the handwriting of a woman who had been told exactly where to press the pen down. I checked the calendar on my phone. September 3rd was the same week my grandmother had been taken to the emergency room after a fall. I remembered a text from Patricia at the time. "Gran took a tumble. Nothing serious. She's resting." I had thought nothing of it. The hospital discharge summary, which I found buried in the mail, noted, "Patient disoriented, intermittent confusion. Recommend neurological follow-up." They had gotten her to sign a power of attorney during the exact same week she had been hospitalized for confusion. I photographed everything. Then I called Helen. Helen came to the house on Friday, not to her office. She said it mattered that we do this at my grandmother's own kitchen table, and I understood why the moment she laid everything out. The table was old maple, scratched from 50 years of Thanksgivings, stained with coffee rings my grandmother always said gave it character. Now it held 5 documents laid out in a row, edges aligned like evidence at a hearing. Document 1. The recorded trust deed, filed with the Briarwood Town Clerk on August 12th of last year. The house had been legally transferred into the Eleanor A. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, 14 months earlier. Stamped, indexed, public record. Document 2. The durable power of attorney naming me, Claire Whitfield, as my grandmother's agent, executed the same day. 2 witnesses, notarized by Owen Fitch. Document 3. Dr. Talbot's capacity evaluation letter, dated August 9th, 2 pages, clinical and precise. Mrs. Whitfield demonstrates full understanding of the nature and consequences of the legal instruments she is executing. She is oriented to time, place, and person. She identifies her assets accurately and articulates clear preferences for their disposition. Document 4. The September power of attorney naming Richard. Shaky signature, no capacity evaluation, no independent witness, executed during a week of documented medical confusion. Document 5. The listing agreement. Trevor's name as seller's representative. Carol Denning as agent. An off-market sale priced $50,000 below comparable homes. Helen stood across from me, hands flat on the table. "The house has been in the trust for over a year," she said. "Your grandmother cannot sell it as an individual. The September power of attorney, even if it were otherwise valid, doesn't grant authority over trust assets, and it almost certainly isn't valid given the medical record." She looked at me. "This sale cannot close. The house was never theirs to sell." I stared at the 2 signatures side by side, one strong, one trembling, and at the physician's letter drawing a hard line between the woman my grandmother had been and the woman they had taken advantage of. "She won't remember the house by Christmas," Patricia's voice echoed in my head. But my grandmother had remembered. She had remembered before any of them. Helen and I made a plan. Quiet, methodical, built on paper instead of anger. Step 1. We needed a current capacity evaluation for my grandmother, something a court would accept to confirm that the September power of attorney had been signed when she lacked the mental ability to understand it. That meant calling Dr. Talbot's office and scheduling a formal neurocognitive assessment. I called Monday morning. The receptionist put me on hold for 11 minutes. When she came back, her voice had that careful, practiced quality I recognized from my own job, the tone people use when they are about to deliver bad news wrapped in protocol. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitfield, but we've received a request to restrict access to Mrs. Whitfield's medical records." I gripped the phone. "Restrict access from whom?" "I can't disclose that, but the request came in about 6 weeks ago. It specifies that medical records and evaluation results are not to be released to anyone other than the designated family contact." "And who is the designated family contact?" A pause. "Richard Whitfield." My father. They had locked me out of her medical records. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. 6 weeks earlier was mid-September, right after they had gotten her to sign the power of attorney. They had not just gotten her signature, they had built a wall around her. I called Helen. They restricted her records. "Expected," she said, unsurprised. "We'll file a HIPAA authorization under the durable power of attorney. Your document predates theirs and names you as healthcare agent. The clinic is legally obligated to honor it. I'll send the paperwork today." 2 days later, I had the records. Dr. Talbot agreed to perform a current evaluation. The system works, I told myself. Slowly, but it works. Patricia came to the house on a Thursday evening. She did not bring flowers or food, or any of the things you would bring if you were visiting your mother-in-law. She brought a brochure. Maple Glen Assisted Living. She spread it out on the kitchen table, the same table where Helen and I had laid out the documents 3 days earlier. "It's a beautiful facility, Claire. Private rooms, a garden, activities every afternoon. Gran doesn't want to leave her house. Gran doesn't know what she wants." Patricia smoothed the brochure with both palms. "Your father and I have been looking into this for weeks. If we move her before Thanksgiving, we can have the house staged and listed by December 1st. I looked at her. She was wearing her church pearls and the cashmere scarf she had bought in Aspen. "You're staging the house for the buyer you already have." Her expression flickered, just for a second, a crack in the plaster. "Claire, I know this is emotional for you. You've always been attached to this house, but your brother's company is in real trouble, and this family needs to pull together. By selling a 79-year-old woman's home out from under her. After everything I've done for this family." Her voice cracked. Real tears or performed ones, I could not tell. After 32 years, I had stopped trying to tell the difference. "The papers are already with the title company," she said. "Closing is November 15th. This is happening, Claire." She left the brochure on the table. I almost walked away that night. It would have been easier. But if you have ever watched someone decide that an older person's worth comes with an expiration date, you already know exactly why I stayed. If this story is hitting close to home, type "I see her" in the comments and subscribe so you're here for what happens at the closing table. I had 9 days. The closing was set for November 15th at 2 o'clock at Capital Title Services on Main Street, 3 blocks from the Briarwood Town Green. Patricia had booked it like a dinner reservation, efficient, final, not open for discussion. I sat in Helen's conference room the next morning while she laid out my options. Option 1, file an emergency petition with probate court to block the sale. It would work, Helen was confident of that, but it would be public, slow, and expensive, and it would give Trevor and Patricia time to scramble, time to move my grandmother, time to hire their own attorney, time to muddy the water. Option 2, let the closing happen. Walk in with the documents. Let the truth do what truth does when it meets paperwork that cannot withstand it. If you show up at the closing with the recorded trust deed and the capacity evidence, Helen said, the title company will do the rest of the work for you. They cannot insure a title that's in dispute. They will not close the transaction. It ends in that room. And if anyone tries to push it through anyway, title officers carry personal liability. No officer with any sense records a deed they know is defective. She took off her glasses. This is the quieter path. No courtroom, no filings, just documents on a table in front of witnesses. The buyer, the agent, the title officer, your family, all in one room. Let the documents speak for themselves. I thought about my grandmother's note. When they come for the house. She had not told me to go to court. She had given me a folder. 9 days. I went home and started counting. Day 1 of 9. I filed a report with Adult Protective Services. I sat in my car outside the Briarwood Municipal Building and called the State Elder Abuse Hotline. The intake worker was patient, precise, and completely unsurprised by anything I described. She had heard versions of this story before. Different names, same architecture underneath. I gave her the facts. A 79-year-old woman with documented dementia, a power of attorney signed during a week of hospitalization, an off-market home sale priced below comparable value, a son profiting from the transaction, a daughter-in-law directing the process. "We'll assign an investigator," she said. "You'll receive a case number within 72 hours. Is there anything that speeds this up? There's a closing date in 9 days. I'll flag it as time-sensitive." I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the car for a full minute, watching 2 elderly women walk arm in arm into the library across the street, laughing about something. Normal. Safe. When I got home, I found a voicemail from Helen. "Claire, something interesting came up. Adult Protective Services told me, informally, that yours isn't the first report they've received on this situation. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about 6 weeks ago. They didn't follow up at the time because the complainant left no contact information, but the file exists. 6 weeks earlier, right around the time they had gotten my grandmother to sign the September power of attorney, someone else had seen what was happening. Someone who had not been brave enough to leave their name, but had cared enough to make the call anyway. I did not know who, not yet. But the fact that the file already existed meant Adult Protective Services would not be starting from zero. The system was slower than anger, but it was building. Day 4. My father came alone. He pulled into the driveway in his 10-year-old sedan, not the car he drove to church or the club, but the one he used for errands, the one nobody would notice. He sat behind the wheel for a long time before he got out. I watched him from the kitchen window. His shoulders were hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered. He came in through the back door, the way he had entered this house since he was a boy. He did not acknowledge me at first. He just stood in the kitchen, looking around at the cabinets his mother had refinished herself, at the window over the sink where she had hung a prism that threw rainbows across the floor every morning. "She used to sing in this kitchen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every Sunday morning." I remember. He sat down at the table and put his hands flat on the maple surface. I saw them shake. "I know what you think of me," he said. I waited. I didn't want any of this. Trevor's in over his head. Patricia says the house is the only way. And Mom... His voice broke, just barely, a hairline fracture in a foundation. Mom wouldn't want Trevor to lose everything. "You could still stop this, Dad." He looked at me for one long, trembling second. I saw the boy who had grown up in this kitchen, who had eaten cake off these plates, who had once been carried to bed by the same woman now sleeping in the next room. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Patricia. He stood up. I should go. He left through the back door without saying goodbye to his mother. I washed his coffee cup and put it away. Day 5. I bought a cake. Not a fancy one, just a small round cake from the bakery on Elm Street, vanilla with buttercream, because that is what she loved, and one single candle, because 79 individual candles seemed like a fire hazard, and I wanted to make her laugh. I set it on the kitchen table at 3 o'clock, with 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 napkins, and a pot of tea. "Gran, come sit." She shuffled in from the living room, reading glasses on top of her head, a crossword folded in her cardigan pocket. She saw the cake and stopped. "Whose birthday?" "Yours. We're doing it over." She sat down. I lit the candle. She looked at the flame the way you look at something you are trying to hold carefully in your mind, deliberately, as if staring hard enough might make the moment stick. "Make a wish," I said. She closed her eyes. She blew, and the candle went out on the first try. "What did you wish for?" She looked at me with those clear, creek water eyes. "I wished you'd stay." We ate the cake with forks this time. She told me about the hydrangeas she had planted along the front walk in 1987, the year I was born. She told me the kitchen table had come from her mother's house in Bridgeport, carried in on the back of a pickup truck in 1974, and that every scratch on its surface represented a Thanksgiving she had won at cards. Then she set her fork down and leaned toward me. "Don't let them take the table," she said, quiet and fierce. "I won't, Gran. The table stays." I cleared the plates, washed the dishes, and wrapped the leftover cake in foil, writing Gran's birthday round 2 on it in marker. 4 days left until the closing. Day 6. The phone calls started. My Aunt Sylvia, my father's cousin, called first, careful and concerned. "Claire, honey, your mother says you're trying to take control of Gran's finances." She used the word manipulating. I held the phone away from my ear and looked at the ceiling. "Aunt Sylvia, did Patricia mention that she and Trevor are trying to sell Gran's house while Gran has dementia?" Silence. She said it was a family decision. It's a decision Gran didn't make. My mother's friend from the parish council called next, then Trevor's business partner, then a woman from the garden club who had known my grandmother for 40 years. Each call carried the same script, with only slight variations. Claire is overstepping. Claire is emotional. Claire doesn't understand the family's financial situation. Patricia had done what Patricia did best. She had shaped the story before I ever had a chance to speak. I did not counter it. I did not post anything online. I did not call anyone back to plead my case. Helen had told me the documents speak. I did not have to. But on day 6, around 9 that night, my phone rang one more time. It was my grandmother's younger sister, Rose, 81 years old and still sharp, still living in Bridgeport. "Claire," her voice was dry and clear. "I don't believe a word Patricia is saying, and I want you to know why." "Why?" "Because your grandmother called me last year, in August. She said she'd been to see a lawyer. She said she was putting the house in order while she still could. She said, if anything happens, back Claire up." I gripped the phone. "I'm backing you up," Rose said. "Whatever you need." 3 days left until the closing. Day 7. Helen and I confirmed the details. Capital Title Services, November 15th, 2 o'clock, Conference Room B. The escrow officer was a woman named Susan Reyes, 22 years in the business, described to me as thorough and strictly by the book. The buyer was Stonewall Capital Group, a regional cash acquisition firm that bought undervalued residential properties, flipped or rented them, and moved on. Their representative was a man named Mark Ostroff, who had been copied on both the listing agreement and the purchase contract. Carol Denning would attend as the listing agent. Patricia and Trevor would come as sellers' representatives. Richard would come because Patricia told him to. Helen made one more off-the-record call to the title company and learned something that made her pause. Susan Reyes flagged the file 3 weeks ago, Helen told me. During the preliminary title search, she noted the house was held in a trust. She contacted Carol Denning for clarification. Carol sent over a signed affidavit claiming the trust had been dissolved and the property reconveyed to your grandmother individually. Susan accepted it provisionally, but noted in her file that no recorded reconveyance deed had ever been found. The closing was scheduled as tentative, pending final title clearance. A clerical error, Carol had called it. She had told the escrow officer the trust had been dissolved and the property returned to my grandmother's individual name. That was not true. The trust had never been dissolved. The deed was still recorded, right there in public record. The deal had already been standing on cracked ice. Susan Reyes had a flag in her file. Carol Denning had lied. All it needed now was for someone to lay the original documents on the table. Here is the thing about paperwork people underestimate. It does not raise its voice, and it does not forget. If you have ever been the quiet one nobody took seriously, this next part is for you. Subscribe and stay with me through the closing table. 2 days left. Day 8. Everything was in place. Helen would attend the closing as attorney of record for the trust, bringing certified copies of the recorded trust deed, the durable power of attorney, and the physician's capacity evaluation. Owen Fitch would come as a notary witness. Adult Protective Services had assigned an investigator named Karen Ellis. She would not be in the room. That was not how it worked, but she had confirmed the case was active and time-sensitive. Whatever happened at the closing would become part of her file. I spent the afternoon at the kitchen table reviewing everything one more time. The trust deed, the power of attorney, the capacity letter, the September power of attorney with its shaking signature, the listing agreement, the purchase contract, the hospital discharge summary from my grandmother's fall in September. Every date, every signature, every medical note pointed in the same direction. I practiced what I would say. Short sentences, no accusations, no raised emotion. Just facts, delivered at the volume of an ordinary conversation. Helen had coached me. You're not there to argue. You're not there to convince anyone. You're there to present documents that speak for themselves. Let the title officer do the rest. I was not the daughter they had ignored. I was not the paperwork one. I was the successor trustee of the Eleanor A. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, and I had every legal right to sit at that table. More than a right, an obligation. That evening, I ironed a blouse and set out my work shoes, the same ones I had worn the night I drove 3 hours to sing happy birthday to a woman sitting alone in her kitchen. Tomorrow, they would sit down to sign for a house that was never theirs to sell, and I would be there when they found out. The night before the closing, I sat with my grandmother in the living room. She was having a good hour, not a good day. Those were rare now, but a good hour. She was working a crossword with her reading glasses at the end of her nose, filling in the squares with a ballpoint pen. No pencil, she always said. Pencils were for people who didn't trust themselves. Gran, tomorrow's going to be a big day. She did not look up. 7 across. Legal instrument of protection. 5 letters. I smiled. Trust. She wrote it in. Smarty pants. I watched her hand as she wrote. The pen moved slowly but with intention. The letters were small and careful. Not the looping confidence from 14 months earlier, but not the collapse of the September signature either. Somewhere in between, a woman at the edge of the window, still reaching for the glass. She set the crossword down and looked at me. You're staying. I'm staying. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out her old glasses case, the leather one with the brass clasp she had carried since I was a little girl. She opened it and took out a folded piece of paper, handing it to me. It was a note in her handwriting, shaky but legible. For Claire, the keeper of the table. Below it, her signature. Not the strong one from the year before. Not the broken one from September. Something in between, trembling but intentional, written by a woman who knew she was fading and wanted to leave one more mark while she still could. I'm not gone yet, she said. I folded the note into my wallet. In the morning, the folder, the note, and I would go to the closing together. Capital Title Services occupied a single-story brick building on Main Street, with tinted windows and a brass door handle polished to a mirror finish. I parked across the street at 1:45. Helen pulled in beside me at 1:50. Owen was already inside. We walked in together, Helen carrying her briefcase, me carrying the manila folder. Conference room B was small, 10 chairs around an oval table, a water pitcher, a printer humming in the corner. Susan Reyes, the escrow officer, was arranging documents in neat stacks at the head of the table. She looked up when we walked in, glanced at Helen, and paused for half a second, the kind of pause that meant she recognized the name. Ms. Marsh, I didn't see your firm listed on this transaction. I represent the Eleanor A. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust, Helen said. We have documents relevant to this closing. Susan's pen stopped moving. Before she could respond, the door opened behind us. Patricia came in first, cashmere blazer, church pearls, her smile already in position, bright and social, a hostess arriving at her own party. Trevor followed in a tailored sport coat, jaw set, a leather portfolio under his arm. Richard trailed behind them, gray-faced, staring at the floor. Behind them came Carol Denning, blonde highlights and kitten heels, a stack of closing paperwork fanned out in her hand like a winning hand of cards. And last, Mark Ostroff, the buyer's representative, in a navy suit and a no-nonsense expression. Patricia saw me and stopped. Claire. Her eyes moved to Helen, then to the folder in my hands. Her smile did not change, but the muscles underneath it did. What are you doing here? Taking a seat, I said, and sat down at the table. Helen sat beside me. I placed the manila folder in front of me and waited. The room went very quiet. Even the printer stopped humming. Susan looked at Helen. You said you have documents. I do. Helen opened her briefcase and laid 3 items on the table, one at a time, each centered and square, the way you would lay evidence before a judge. First, a certified copy of the recorded trust deed. This deed was recorded with the Briarwood Town Clerk on August 12th of last year. It transfers the property at 14 Oakwood Lane into the Eleanor A. Whitfield Revocable Living Trust. Ms. Whitfield, she nodded toward me, is the successor trustee. Patricia's smile fell, not all at once, but in stages, like a building losing its floors one by one. Second, the durable power of attorney naming Claire as my grandmother's agent, executed on August 9th of last year, notarized, witnessed, and currently in effect. Trevor leaned forward. We have a more recent power of attorney that supersedes. Third, Helen placed the physician's letter on the table. A capacity evaluation by Dr. Ann Talbot, dated August 9th, confirming that Eleanor had full testamentary capacity when she signed these documents. I also have Dr. Talbot's current evaluation, completed last week, confirming that Eleanor now lacks capacity, meaning any documents she signed after her cognitive decline, including the September power of attorney your family obtained, were signed without the legal competence required to make them binding. The room went still. Susan picked up the trust deed. She read it, compared it against the title report in her own file, and looked up at Carol Denning. Ms. Denning, you informed me the trust had been dissolved. Carol's face went white. I was told. The trust was never dissolved, Helen said. The recorded deed confirms it. This property belongs to the trust. The sale cannot proceed. Susan Reyes set the documents down, squared her shoulders, and said the words that ended everything. I cannot close this transaction. She had remembered. She had remembered all of it. Mark Ostroff closed his portfolio. Carol stared down at the table. Trevor gripped the armrests of his chair until his knuckles went white, and Patricia looked at me as if I had pulled the house out from under her feet. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Patricia broke it. This is ridiculous. Her voice climbed as she stood, palms flat on the table, pearls swinging. Claire is a paralegal. She has no authority. My husband is Eleanor's son, her only child, and he has a signed power of attorney that gives him full control. A power of attorney signed by a woman who was hospitalized for confusion the very same week, Helen said, calm and measured, with no capacity evaluation attached. A power of attorney that, even if it were valid, does not grant authority over assets held in a trust. You can't do this. Trevor stood too. His voice was not Patricia's theatrical climb, it was raw. I have a $740,000 payment due in 6 weeks. If this deal falls through... Mr. Whitfield, your financial obligations are not this office's concern, Susan said. This is my grandmother's house. This is the trust's house, Helen corrected, administered by the trustee your grandmother appointed. That trustee is sitting at this table. Trevor turned on me. You're going to destroy this family. I looked at him and kept my voice at exactly the volume I had practiced. Conversational, steady. You tried to sell a 79-year-old woman's home while she sat alone on her birthday, eating cake by herself. Nobody even came to cut it. You had her sign documents during a hospital stay. You lied to the title company about a dissolved trust. And you're telling me I'm the one destroying this family? Trevor's mouth opened, then closed. His fists stayed clenched at his sides. Patricia was crying now, loud and messy. After everything I've done. Richard sat motionless. He had not spoken since walking into the room. He stared at the trust deed, at his mother's signature, and I could see him doing the math. She had planned this. She had gone around him. She had looked at her only son and decided he was not enough. Mark Ostroff stood. I think we're done here. He nodded to Susan and walked out. Carol Denning was already gathering her things, avoiding everyone's eyes. Helen spoke into the quiet. For the record, an Adult Protective Services investigation into the financial exploitation of Eleanor Whitfield is currently active. The September power of attorney will be formally challenged. Any further attempts to sell, encumber, or transfer trust property without the trustee's authorization will be treated as a legal matter. Patricia stopped crying. She stared at Helen, then at me, tears still wet on her cheeks, but the expression underneath them shifting from grief into something harder. You'll regret this, she said. When Trevor loses his company, when your father has nowhere to turn, when this family falls apart, you'll remember that you did this. I stood up. I picked up the manila folder and slid it into my bag. I looked at my mother, at the cashmere, the pearls, the tears she had learned to deploy like weather. You don't get to decide what she's worth, I said. Then I turned to Susan Reyes. Thank you for your professionalism. Susan nodded. I'll be documenting this closing as void and flagging the file. You'll receive confirmation by email. I walked out of conference room B. Helen followed. Owen held the door. The November air hit my face, cold and clean, and I stood on the sidewalk for 10 full seconds before I remembered to breathe. Helen touched my elbow. You did well. I did what she asked me to do. That's exactly what I mean. I drove back to Oakwood Lane with the folder sitting on the passenger seat, exactly where the gas station bouquet had been 9 days earlier. The house was still there. The hydrangeas still lined the front walk. The porch light was on. I went inside and found my grandmother asleep in her recliner, the crossword still in her lap, her reading glasses on. I knelt beside her chair and tucked the quilt around her shoulders. It's done, Gran, I said. The house is safe. She stirred. Her hand found mine, that same thin grip, that same paper towel roll wrist. Her eyes opened, cloudy at first, then clearing for just a moment. Claire, "I'm here. Did you keep the table?" I laughed, a real one, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep and surprises you. "I kept the table." She smiled, small and certain. "Good girl." She closed her eyes, and within a minute, she was asleep again, her breathing slow and even, the crossword rising and falling gently on her chest. I sat on the floor beside her recliner and looked through the doorway at the kitchen, at the maple table, scratched and coffee-stained, still standing where it had stood since 1974. The folder was in my bag. The note was in my wallet. The house was in the trust. And for the first time in 9 days, the counting finally stopped. Here is what happened after. Trevor's balloon payment came due 8 weeks later, right on schedule. He missed it. The bank started foreclosure proceedings on his development projects, 3 half-finished townhomes in Glastonbury and a commercial lot in Wethersfield. Trevor Whitfield Properties filed for bankruptcy in January. He sold the German sedan. Last I heard, he was working as a project manager for someone else's company, making a third of what he used to earn. He never called to apologize. Patricia's standing in Briarwood fractured, not all at once. Reputations erode slowly in small towns. But the story leaked. People talk. Aunt Rose talked. Susan Reyes had documented everything in the closing file. The church group chat, the same one where Patricia had posted her Aspen selfie, went quiet around her. She stopped attending library board meetings. She and Richard moved to a condo in West Hartford that spring. My father emailed me once, in March. 3 sentences. "I should have done more. I know that now. I'm sorry." I read it twice. I did not respond. Some apologies arrived too late to be anything more than a record of what a person already knew they should have said. Adult Protective Services substantiated the complaint. Over the following 3 months, through 2 probate hearings that no one in my family bothered to contest, the September power of attorney was formally voided. The court appointed me as my grandmother's legal guardian and confirmed my role as permanent trustee of her trust. I deferred my bar exam. I took a leave of absence from the firm. I moved into the guest room at 14 Oakwood Lane, the one with the ceiling crack I had traced since I was 6, and I became the person who made sure Eleanor Whitfield ate dinner, took her medication, and sat on the porch in the afternoons when the light came through the hydrangeas. It was not the career path I had planned. It was the right one. On a Tuesday in April, I baked a cake, vanilla with buttercream, nothing fancy. I set it on the kitchen table, the one from Bridgeport, the one that had survived 50 years of Thanksgivings and 1 attempted theft. My grandmother came in from the living room, crossword in hand. "Whose birthday?" "Nobody's. It's Tuesday. We're having cake because it's Tuesday." She sat down. She picked up a fork, took a bite, and closed her eyes. "This is my recipe," she said. "It's good." She took another bite. "Don't change it." We ate in the kitchen with the afternoon light striping across the floor. The prism still hung above the sink, throwing small rainbows across the tile. The table held. A person's worth does not expire when their memory does, and the quietest love in a family is sometimes the only one still keeping watch. That's my story. 1 empty party, 1 manila folder, and a grandmother who remembered first. If this reminded you to check on a loved one's directive, do it today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.